Oh, hey, didn't see y'all there. Tevin here, lead educator with Grow Local South Texas. This is going to be our Ask Our Educator Week 3 Q&A. Great question. So while you can grow your traditional blueberries and raspberries, you do really have to consider your soil for those. So how you're going to mend your soil. Blueberries enjoy acidic soil. So to kind of mimic that acidic soil you might find, out on the west coast from all of the pine trees, you can add something like cotton burr compost, which is pretty acidic, so to kind of mimic that acidity that they do enjoy. So you can grow those traditional ones. Same with the raspberries. There are like thornless and also thorned varieties of raspberries that grow well here. They take some time to develop those berries. They're native white mulberries that grow, but you can get berries within the year or two if you propagate a tree, and you can get some of those mulberries. They're really tasting nice little small berries. There are also things called beauty berries, which are a native plant here. They develop a purplish color berry that aren't the best raw, but once you process them into like a jam or a jelly, they're fantastic. We also have something called a Suriname cherry, which isn't technically a berry, but it is a bushing plant that grows these little cherries about this big that are good raw. Kids love them, just eating them right off the plants, but you can also process them into a jam or a jelly, and they work out great. So this bug that you have pictured, you shouldn't have to worry too much about this. This is a bug called Jadera. It's a harmless bug that is more interested in eating seeds and other things that are dropping from your plants or dropping from your weedelia. I wouldn't worry too much about it actually eating your plants. They're not very interested in the plant material, but more interested in seeds and other things that drop from the plants. So it is commonly confused with the bug called a box elder bug, which they do cause a concern in different types of the year. The box elders, they look similar to this, but that's not what this is that you have pictured. So yes, it might be in your plants, but I wouldn't worry about it actually eating your plant. And it's harmless to humans. It doesn't sting or bite or anything like that. So you can feel comfortable, flicking it away or picking it and removing it if you do feel like it is causing some type of nuisance. That is a great question for this time of year, and I would say mulch, 100% mulch. A few inches of natural, non-dyed mulch can work wonders. So adding that extra layer of mulch is not only going to protect your soil from the intense South Texas sun, but also going to prevent the moisture in the water from evaporating from your garden. So it's going to kind of act as like a blanket to kind of seal in the moisture. So you'll get to water less. On top of that, it's going to break down and eventually turn into more organic material for your garden. So it's going to kind of be there as a fertilizer as well. So it's a win-win with that one. On top of that, that would be the easiest solution to do. What you can also do is if you are interested in collecting rainwater, the city does offer rainwater barrels for pickup at like a discounted price at around this time of year, going into spring kind of time. And you can get online and see if they're still doing it. But they offer barrels that you can go and pick up. I think they limit them one per family, or one per household. But they encourage that we're collecting rainwater, and this time of year when we kind of get into the drought season, you can collect a big barrel of rainwater and use that to water your landscape. So look into that for some other options. So when it comes to depth, that really depends on how much money you want to spend on filling those raised beds up. So the deeper you make your raised beds, the more expensive it's going to be to fill that up with soil. So just keep that in mind. I would say start with like a minimal of, say about 1 foot, and then go from there. That minimal 1 foot is going to be deep enough for pretty much anything that you could imagine, even if you're eventually in the fall doing something like carrots and beets, that you need some depth and you want them to grow deep into the soil. That'll give you plenty of room for that, but then also for your above ground growing plants. So pretty much everything else, all your greens, tomatoes, will all do great in a raised bed. So just consider that, how much you want to spend on soil. And if you are planting this late in the season, I would recommend trying things like black-eyed peas or longevity spinach, which is like a perennial spinach you can buy that can handle the heat, and they don't require much watering. And then you can even do something like edamame, or also known as soybeans. They grow well in the heat, and they're kind of a fun, interesting, different kind of plant to grow for us here. But just be careful because of the heat. Make sure you're mulching your bed on the very top layer to kind of prevent your water from evaporating. No, you're not doing anything wrong. I wouldn't blame the problem on necessarily you. Squash can suffer from many different problems, including vine borers, which are these little creatures that get into the stalks, like where the branches are of your squash. Once they bore inside, there's really no going back if you don't catch them in time. They literally kind of bore in there, and once they get to a certain point, your plant can explode essentially, and it just kind of destroys your squash. But it also prevents them from producing more fruit, or not necessarily fruit, but your squash. So if you notice that that's happening, if you inspect where your branches are coming out of the ground there, you'll see what looks like almost like a sawdust kind of built up, and you'll see a hole, and that means that they're infested with these borers, which you can cut them open, pull them out, squish them, and then kind of backfill with some dirt or some mud and kind of close that hole up, and it can save them if you get it early enough. But that's a very common problem with squash, especially here for us. A lot of people run into that, and there's not much you can really do to prevent it without using chemical pesticides and whatnot to get rid of them. Another thing that can happen with the squash is just a lack of pollination. So if you don't have enough pollinators around to get those flowers pollinated, you can self-pollinate, and you can YouTube how to do that properly. So you can self-pollinate your squash if it doesn't seem like they're producing enough. It's a little time consuming, but it can be done, and it can increase the amount of squash you're getting. Also, powdery mildew is a very common thing with our humidity and heat. When this heat and humidity starts to roll in, the squash can suffer quite a bit from the powdery mildew, and it does seem to have an effect on how much the squash is producing. Some varieties are not as prone to developing the powdery mildew, so maybe look for a variety next time that may not suffer from the powdery mildew, but it's kind of hard to avoid again at this time of year as this humidity, and we've been getting a lot of rain too, so it usually happens after it's real wet, and then they get that powdery mildew, and it kind of stunts them a little bit and just kind of reduces the amount of production they may have. So don't necessarily blame it on you, and it could be something with your soil and maybe not having the right balance of nutrients, so maybe try giving it a boost with the fertilizer, and then if that doesn't work, then it's probably one of those other issues we mentioned. I would recommend compost. Create your own compost. It is the best, easiest, most available fertilizer that you can create at home for free. So I would recommend that. There's going to be a video on that coming soon. Well, it definitely sounds like you have done your best to kind of doctor things up. I think you're on the right path. It seems like they do enjoy well-drained, loamy, slightly acidic soil. So maybe try to amend the soil a little bit and kind of match those needs. So maybe give it a little bit of a boost that way, just to kind of give it that next level of a push. But it sounds like you've already given it some fertilizer and done your best to fix things up. So maybe just give a little bit of time and see how things turn out with it. And over the weeks, if you notice some new growth on there and it starts to grow, that's probably a great sign. Make sure it's get the right amount of water and it's not getting too dried out. And if you notice any big changes with it, or if you notice something kind of funky going on with it, maybe just do a quick little Google search on that problem that you're having and see if there's any solutions that you can find for that. All right, so thanks again for another Q&A. Stay tuned for week 4 coming up. Send in your questions so we can get them answered for you.